ICE as in el hielo. ICE as in immigration and customs enforcement.
Yep.
The new brown shirts, the new Nazis, the people that are kidnapping young children, taking them from their families, children coming to this country to seek refuge. Or should I just stop at the word children?
Yeah.
Children, period. Human children being traumatized, terrorized, abused, neglected, trafficked, enslaved, tortured, and yes, killed. All of these things are happening under ICE, but it's not just ICE. So I invite you today to join me on a Mexican Crossing Lines with Cindy Gomez-Schempp
And Duke Gomez-Schempp.
here on 88.1 FM KPPPLP Fargo Moorhead, where we are adding local color to your airwaves. And tonight I bring you this difficult topic. It's difficult for me, especially being a Mexican crossing lines, because it hits home, obviously. It's something that deeply affects me, my community, the people that I love, the people that I call my friends, my family, my neighbors, you know. And it's something that few people are showing empathy for. What I have seen is very troubling virtue signaling, and I need to have a discussion with my audience tonight so you can tell the difference, so that you can pick out this virtue signaling BS in your community, call it out for what it is. Somebody trying to pretend they're not on board with this Nazi kidnapping of children and torturing of children, and acting as if they're allies to those still with a conscience in this country that think that this is absolutely monstrous and inhumane. So if you want to be able to, and it's important to be able to distinguish between those two kinds of people, the people that are simply virtue signaling versus those who actually give a rip and want to do something to protect these children.
Exactly.
And are not just people that want to look like they're not monsters, right? But they're completely okay with this. Because, you know, Trump has said, as he sees people being really freaked out that he is a monster that eats children, that kills children, that tortures children, he is going, oh, well, this looks really bad. So those Democrats, Obama, damn it, Obama. That's his way of trying to, like, deflect.
Exactly.
Don't look at me and what I'm doing. I'm not over here eating babies. So it's just one great deflection from Americans today about this topic. And I need to get to the bottom of it because it's very upsetting to me. I know that there's a lot of other things that we need to talk about, but I can't think of anything that's more important right now than this. So I want to invite all of you to share this message, especially with white folks, especially with progressive white folks, especially with all of those progressive white folks in your communities right now that are denouncing this treatment of Mexican children, of immigrant children, of refugee children in America, that are posting about it on Facebook saying, this is disgusting. What have we become in America? I'm ashamed to be an American.
Yeah.
This is monstrous. These people are no longer humans. Blah, 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 blah. You've seen it, right?
Oh, yeah.
I know you've seen it. You've seen it, right, Duke?
Definitely. And, you know, this stuff's been going on for years. We've had detention centers in our community, and people haven't done anything about it. We had ICE, we had Homeland Security get formed, and ICE get formed under Homeland Security, and they've been basically grabbing and snatching people out of our communities for years, all over the country, not just in the big cities like New York and you know, in California and Colorado. They've been doing it in Fargo-Moorhead, in Moorhead, Minnesota, in Minneapolis. Lots. In fact, there's a detention center in Minneapolis that they'll take all the detainees over to Bloomington and then transport them out of the country on an airplane. This has been going on for years and years and years, and we haven't done anything about it. We have a detention center in Grand Forks. We have our local law enforcement centers holding undocumented people and basically doing the job of ICE. I mean, this has been going on for years and years and years, and now people are objecting.
Yes, now people are virtue signaling because, see, a decade ago, when people in this community, including yourself and myself, and a large group of different nonprofit organizations, community leaders, people from the school systems.
We even had a jailer.
Law enforcement, we involved everyone in this discussion, and I am here to remind people of what we've already discussed, because it feels to me like everyone in Fargo-Moorhead, and I'm sure this is probably happening in a community near you, are acting as if we have collective amnesia when it comes to immigration policy and how it's been carried out in America so far.
Yeah.
And I want to remind all of you that that is not true, that no, it's not amnesia, and those pretending not to know what we've already done in this country to immigrants, specifically to Mexicans, what we have already done to people of color in this country, unwanted by this white supremacist government. We're going to make sure that you are reminded of what we already know. And I would also challenge all of you who are listening across the country, even internationally, because I know that we do have an international audience. Saludos a los que están en México. Saludos a toda mi raza. And saludos to all of my Latino Spanish-speaking people, because I want you guys to go and challenge the people in your own community and find out if people are really concerned about the lives of these children, the separation of families, and the destruction of these communities, or are they just pretending so they don't look like monsters who actually support these children being put into trains and marched into a gas chamber? I'm giving you the equivalent of genocide. Okay, because that's what's happening. That's what's always been happening to indigenous children in this country. Mexicans are First Nation indigenous people of this continent. We were conquered people. Remember Cortez? Yeah, that was my people. Okay, so lest we forget what we already know, I want to remind people what that looks like here in our community. And I think all you have to do in your own community is go find a Mexican, okay? Because let me tell you something. Every time this issue comes up, all of the white progressive leadership of our community stand up and say, "Oh my God, this is horrid and horrible. We will lead the salvation of these people." And people like me have stood up in this community. I've probably gotten up right close to your face or up in your face and said, "No, we don't need you to do it like this. Where are the Mexican people? Where are the Mexican voices? Oh, why are you trying to censor my voice? Why are you trying to censor the way that we want to work on our own liberation, Fargo-Moorhead? Why are you trying to tell us to wait for a more convenient time, to stand up against racism in our community, to fire racist police, racist teachers, racist superintendents, to get rid of Nazis in our midst, in our city leadership, in our city government, in our state government?" Because when we have brought this up to you numerous times before, we have been told to shh, to more politely ask, to get on our knees and beg, to do it more nicely so we can get more followers, recruit more people to our side, to do window dressing campaigns where we myth bust all the racist stereotypes that white people in these communities have against us, rather than addressing the racists who are creating these policies that seek to destroy us. And so, I want to start off by acknowledging the very real pain that is caused by seeing what our country is doing to indigenous children. Let us not forget that these images are nothing new. By the way, I appreciate all the stories, the messages, the articles that you sent. I have shared a lot of those. I have put them on our website. I wanted to do a story on this much sooner, but I have been emotionally distraught, terrorized, and absorbed, overwhelmed by what has been happening in this country. But more importantly, by the silence and complicity of everyone around me. By the silence and complicity of Americans virtue signaling, "Oh, I'm so disgusted." That is what is terrifying to me. And if you don't want to keep terrifying Mexicans like me while you think you're over there looking like you're just as saintly as white Jesus, then please hear me out on this and stop doing what you're doing on social media and otherwise. And listen to people of color, Mexicans in particular, when they're telling you what we need you to do to be an ally right now. How you can be an ally right now. So here are some of the images that I know that people have been sharing. I'm sure you've seen them. Some of these images are recent. Some of these images are older. People have been trying to circulate these images of these children with these flimsy, what are those, emergency, they look like foil paper.
Yeah, foil blankets.
They're foil blankets. The detention centers in which these children are kept many times are called hieleras because they are kept at such low temperatures, in such cold temperatures that the children get sick from being constantly in this cold. They're torturing the children. They're not just punishing the parents and punishing the children for bringing their kids into the country with them. They're torturing them. They're subjecting them to cramped quarters like these where there is no bed for them to sleep, where there's oftentimes no toilet for them to use. There isn't even enough floor space to walk. This is inhumane even for the most beloved thing in America, animals, actual animals. Trump called immigrants, refugees, animals. He called our people animals. But animals in America are treated much better than refugees and immigrants and First Nations people. And they always have been. But I know that you all know that. I know that you all understand this reality, that Indigenous people have always been treated in this way. When I saw you all posting these images and these stories and talking about Jeff Merkley, which I brought up on my last show as well, I was really disheartened, not by the posts themselves, but by who was making them. Because many of those people are people in my community that were part of the meetings, part of the groups, part of the organizations, part of the institutions, part of the campaigns where I myself and other people like my husband brought to the attention of our community in what ways the racist institutions, the racist policies, and the racist actions taken against people of color were affecting us and leading us to this moment. And so I sat there and I looked at those people who have argued with me when I called them out on their own racism, which I felt they needed to address, posting their outrage for these lives of these children, When the life of me, my voice telling you you're racist, you have a problem, and when this kind of atrocity is marched right in front of you, when they march these children right in front of you into the gas chambers, the majority of you will sit there and sit silently as it happens before your eyes. And you know what? Doing this virtue signaling BS while actually not standing up to any of the racism in your own community, any of the complicity that is putting these children in these situations, that is leading them to getting raped, sex trafficked, separated from their families, tortured, abused, and killed, that is leading these families to be separated, well, you know what? You are just as guilty as ICE. You are just as cold as ICE. You are just as complicit, and you have just as much blood on your hands as ICE. Because yes, you have known. Yes, you do know. You've seen it happening in your own communities, and you turned a blind eye. And I had to speak out. I felt like, you know what? I know all these well-meaning white people posting all this BS on their Facebook page are just trying to be good white folks. But you know what? My heart is sick. My heart is aching. My heart hurts for those children, because when I look at those children, I see my own. When I look at those children, I see my grandparents. I see my mother, who was sitting in cotton fields in Texas, picking cotton since she was 6 years old, who was the 14th child that my grandmother had, 6 of whom died, who had spent her entire life trying to be able to simply spend time with her mother. My mother grew up without her mother because my grandmother had to be a slave, a migrant worker, a wage slave, whatever you want to call us in the present day. Whatever slur, whether Hispanic, whether Latino, whatever new rebranding you need to make of me so you can feel comfortable looking at me. That is the names that we have had to go through. Those are the changes that we have had to go through. But it isn't changing. It has never changed. We have always struggled to be able to teach our own children, to be able to keep our own children. That's not just for undocumented mothers. That's for the ones born in the United States of these Americas, just like me, who has to fight against social service, who has to fight that school to prison pipeline, who has to fight the cops profiling and stealing your children and killing your children, terrorizing your children. Because every single woman of color in this country who has children knows that fear, knows that pain. We've all had to have that talk with our children about how if they do not comply, they will die. And how nobody in the community is going to care. There will be no justice. No white people will shed a tear for you. And I mean that. Because even the well-meaning white progressives will not be allowed to shed a tear by the racists in the community, so as not to give the appearance that something wrong was actually done to that person in any way. So out of this pain, I wrote this Facebook post. I made this Facebook post public. I saw a lot of people out there posting about what they wanted to do. What do we do? Yeah. All of these white people in Fargo, the most progressive among you, saying, what do we do? Mm-hmm. How do we fight this problem? Whatever can we do to stop this? This is horrendous. We are disgusted. And I see what you're doing. All you're doing is picking a fight with some Trump supporter and going, you guys are the real racists. And then pointing fingers at each other to see who is the least racist among you while you let the children in the cages die. And it shows. You don't care about the kids in the cages. You never cared. You just want to fight with each other over who is less racist. And I got news for you. You're all going to let these kids die. That is what is so disturbing. None of you care enough to stop the bleeding.
Otherwise, they would have done it a long time ago. People in this community have many opportunities to get involved in, and we're going to show you some older news articles of people without documents getting detained, getting deported in our community. At times, a few people have stepped up and tried to do something, like in the Cast 23, the Indian workers that were out at the ethanol plant. But then they go away, they take a break, or they quit working for the organization they're working with, and the stuff goes on and on and on and on. It's been going on for years and years and years. And so for all of a sudden, for you to be upset about it now, you should have been upset for years.
Not only upset, because I told you, acting upset and taking no action is just virtue signaling. It doesn't do anything for me. And you know what? In fact, I'm sick of it. I am literally sick of it. I'm sick of white people posting these things and going, oh my God, this is so disturbing, because I know you. I know you. I live here. I've lived here for over a decade. I'm married to one of the most prolific organizers and activists in this community, with the most rooted connections in North Dakota and Minnesota, with his family going all the way back to homesteaders.
Exactly.
I know all your white people's secrets, for Christ's sake. And you're going to sit here and look at me, a Mexican crossing lines, and tell me you didn't know these things, when personally I have brought them before you on many occasions, and you acted like I was a liar. You acted like this wasn't something you could listen to. You acted like, oh no, not your dad, not your uncle, not your cop, not your police chief, not your neighbor, not your church, not your school. That's what you do to us. You dismiss us, you erase us, and you shove us under the bus every time that we try to hold you accountable for your racism in your communities that leads to this. That's where it always ends up, with genocide. That's where it started, lest you forget. So let me share with you what I said to Fargo-Moorhead. In this moment of pain, this is what I wrote because I was so upset. I said, Dear Fargo-Moorhead, I know you're distraught about all the migrant children ripped from their parents' side. Before you start organizing to go help in some faraway place, consider this. There's no need to drive to Texas or to the Mexico-U.S. border. We can organize against this right here in Fargo-Moorhead. The cops in Fargo-Moorhead, West Fargo, and Dilworth have been picking up, detaining, and helping to deport undocumented people in the region for many years now. Families are being torn apart. Children are being orphaned of one or both of their parents right here in Fargo-Moorhead. No need to look in someone else's backyard. We are and have been profiling people of color, calling in ICE to quote-unquote translate for cops, separating families, and deporting people from our communities. We are guilty of this right here at home. We have legislators like Al Carlson, who was circulating eugenics propaganda from Numbers USA, an organization listed as a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center, to try to pass a papers, please type of law here in North Dakota. Back then, I told local activists that rather than focus on awareness campaigns that do nothing, they should expose the racists in authority in our midst, whether they be in the legislature, the police department, the school system, or the city administration. That we declare we are sanctuary cities, and make it illegal for cops, schools, etc. to ask for proof of citizenship. We are responsible in the Fargo-Moorhead area for allowing these atrocities to continue. We can still do something today and prevent our further involvement in these human atrocities against families and children. We must acknowledge the humanity of these families and children before we lose our own. So, first of all, I wanted to ask you to comment on some of the history of that, because you're very familiar with it.
That's a really good statement. It brings back, reminds me of all the work we've done in the past. I used to work for an organization called People Escaping Poverty Project for over 20 years as a community organizer and executive director. And we took on racial profiling and trying to hold the police department here in Moorhead and Fargo a lot more accountable to the way they were releasing records to the community that caused people not to be able to get housing. As time went on, the country was basically starting to take these contracts with the federal government to basically for the law enforcement to do the job of ICE. And there had been numerous cities across the country who had done what they called separation of powers ordinances. They would hold the city accountable to not using the authority of ICE in the police department because it's not the right place for that sort of authority. You know, the police departments, it's not their job to do ICE enforcement. And so we started a group here in Fargo Moorhead. You know, probably for several years we worked on this to create an ordinance in all the cities. We live in Fargo Moorhead's 2 cities and then Dilworth and West Fargo, a big metropolitan area, pretty much the biggest metropolitan area between Spokane, Washington, and the Twin Cities in Minnesota. And we actually took our model from Minneapolis. Minneapolis is a sanctuary city. And they had passed that ordinance. We got the help from a group called Jewish Community Action and their executive director, Vic Rosenthal. He shared all their documents with us and copies of the ordinance and how they went about to actually get the city council in Minneapolis to approve it being a sanctuary city. So we took that out to our local law enforcement. We had a meeting with all the chiefs of police, you know, from all the cities. And we're trying to make progress. We also saw other groups trying to do things, and we tried to include them in our work. Our organization was basically a coalition of people of color run organizations, and we had members of the Human Rights Commission and Committee in Fargo and Moorhead that were liaisons. You know, as we worked on this, you know, it got a lot of white people scared because we're talking directly to the authorities. You know, if you care about privacy, you always talk about privacy issues. This is a privacy issue. We took it right to the authorities, and people were really nervous. A lot of the leaders who had actually done visible work stayed away from this. And I think it's because of that white fear. You think you're going to lose something. Mm-hmm. You know.
Well, they also, in the Human Rights Committee in Fargo, and the Moorhead one at the time, which were actually robust and functioning organizations, albeit toothless ones, but I digress. They had voted to endorse and support the work of this multi-organizational committee that was working on passing an ordinance to declare the area sanctuary cities. And being in favor of it, Prairie Rose Seminole, a very well-known local, what would you call her? Farcical?
Yeah, she's a farcical.
She's a farcical. She's like a Chase Lionized.
Yep.
She's one of those people that shills for white supremacy. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why white people celebrate mediocrity so much, but they love them some Prairie Rose Seminole around here. Mm-hmm. Even though everyone watched, everyone saw that she was ousted, that she had to step down from the Human Rights Commission in shame for what she did. She killed the work of, I don't know, dozens of organizations, of people of color that worked together for years, plus the Human Relations Committees, plus the city administrations of 4 cities, plus the police departments of 4 cities. She killed all of that work. And I'm sure that her white owners, her white puppet masters, who told her what to do and how to kill this thing, wanted exactly that, because they were more than eager in this community to vote to kill the idea to have sanctuary cities declared here. But what does that tell you about the people in these communities? They don't really care about indigenous communities. They don't really care about the well-being of those communities. And shortly after all of this happened, the Fargo and the Moorhead Human Relations Committees got shaken up pretty bad.
Yeah.
The Moorhead one basically became dismantled.
Yeah, it got dormant for years, you know, and the thing is that this challenge, you know, and I always looked at the Human Rights Commissions that who cares if you don't have the authority to do an ordinance? You can do a press conference. You can basically make demands of the city.
Yeah.
And they weren't willing to do that. You know, like I said, white people run organizations. White people get really scared when they confront authority. We're talking about the law enforcement that's taking away everybody's rights. But when it's not affecting you personally, You don't care about it. That's why, this was 11 years ago when this happened. Here it is 11 years later, and you're upset that there's children being detained. There were children being detained then. There were children being murdered in the desert then. And there's people in our community who are being detained. U.S. citizens that were taken out of the community and put in detention. Their families had to spend thousands of dollars to find them and get them an attorney to get them out of detention. Because when you get taken in detention, you don't have those civil rights that you think you have.
Even though they are U.S. citizens.
Yes, exactly.
Even though they're permanent U.S. residents. One was from Iraq.
Yeah.
One was from Sudan or
I know it's a Somalian.
Egypt. Oh, Somalia.
Yeah.
Somalia. Exactly. I'm not going to use their names because I don't remember if we had permission to publicly use their names at the time we were.
At the time we were being very careful, because people also, they would have repercussions in their community. And
from speaking out publicly about what law enforcement did to their lives. One of these mothers, her son was picked up by the cops. Again, legal U.S. Permanent U.S. resident or citizen in this case, and he was taken to a detention center. No requirement that the family or anyone associated with the detained person needs to be notified. So you literally think your person has just been kidnapped. Do you know how many people are missing in the United States that simply just went missing because ICE kidnapped them, and you think they're just on a missing persons list somewhere?
Yeah, it's a difficult process. And in fact, the exact chief of police in Moorhead, Chief Ebinger, was responsible for that. And yet he sat in our meetings and he said, you folks have a solution looking for a problem. This is not a problem in our community. We're like, yes, it is. There was a U.S. citizen detained by your department and put into detention. He's like, and what they always do is, you'll have to we'll talk later. You'll have to give me the details of that. And we'll look it up. And they'll come up and they'll spin something that's not true. Because these law enforcement agencies have taken over our community. And you're letting it happen. You're the citizens of those communities. You vote for municipal government that's supposed to control the city. And they're supposed to be under the municipal government. And you let them get above everybody in this community. We have a lot of monsters in law enforcement in all of our communities. And you haven't done a damn thing about it.
And not just in law enforcement, in the schools too. And then of course there's cops in the schools, right?
Yep.
There are the cops in the schools sitting there. And in the hospitals and in the clinics and in all of the places. I mean, I've talked about this on my past shows. I've been talking about immigration issues forever. I have been talking about this forever. As an advocate, as a translator, as a journalist, as a Mexican, my whole life.
Yeah.
Okay? And so I can tell you that I can tell the difference between those who care and those who don't. And I am telling you the read on my community, and I can read your community too. Nobody really acts like this. Nobody says that they care so much about these things and then pretend to have amnesia when it comes to all of the times that we've ignored these situations in our community that have been brought up again and again and again. And to add insult to injury, by the way, I wanted to test my theory. I thought, look at all of the people. I mean, my Facebook page is literally papered in white virtue signaling and white tears, white progressive tears. Oh, the children, the Mexican children. Some of these people have been racist directly to me. Some of these people are even in my own family, my white family, that are racist to me and going, oh, the children. And I'm like, okay, folks, let me post this message to all of you people crying right now for the children in Fargo Moorhead that are saying, what can we do?
Yeah.
What do we do? I want to do something. And all the white ladies are posting under the, let's go to the border. Let's go pick up some kids at social services. Where are they housing them? Let's go to the warehouse. Let's go to Costco and get 5 Mexicans. Let's bring the Mexican kids home. And I'm like, whoa. Let's see if these people really give a shiz. Because they don't have to do that. You don't got to hop on a plane. You don't got to drive to the border. You don't got to fix up a guest spare room to take in migrants. You don't got to build an underground railroad in your house. You don't got to hide a Mexican like Anne Frank. All you got to do is stand up to the racist cops that are putting these kids in those places in the first place. All you got to do is stop the racist police chief in your town, or the racist jail system, illegally, unconstitutionally, and against the morality of humankind. That's what you can do. You can tell the teachers and the administrations of the schools that you're not going to let your children go to a school where they're going to let the brown shirts, the Nazis, walk in and kidnap brown and black children or immigrant children just because. That you're not going to stand for that unless they have a zero tolerance policy for that. That you're not going to allow your child to go to that school. That you're not going to allow funding from your community to go to those schools.
And people think that they're so helpless to do anything. In Fargo, North Dakota, next Tuesday is a primary election in the state. Also happens to be the election for city commissioners, for school board members, for park board members, and those people haven't been talking about these issues. If you're so upset, why aren't you talking to these politicians who are actually going to go into office in July of this year, who could actually hold our police departments and our school systems accountable? People aren't even talking about that. They're just putting things on their Facebook page.
Yeah, they're just putting things on their Facebook page. And by the way, when I posted this on my Facebook page, I was like, okay, well, let's see how many comments I get from people going, okay, Cindy, well, you basically, you smacked me with some truth here, and I'm going to come to the Mexican, and I'm going to say, hey, I'm really serious about wanting to help these kids. What can I do right now, right here, right now? Like, I looked at the message, and you said there's been a lot of missed opportunities. I'm going to use whatever power I have, whatever influence I have, whatever privilege I have in this community as a citizen, as a documented person, as a white person, as a male, as a person that has more authority or more privilege for whatever reason to help these kids. And I want you to tell me what that looks like. And you know how many comments I got? Remember how many comments I got, Duke?
0.
No, that's not true. I got one comment.
Okay, I'm sorry. I missed that one. What's happened since last time I looked at it?
It was Patty McLaughlin, and she said, thank you, Cindy.
Oh.
That was the only comment to that post that I got.
Wow.
That's it. And you know what that tells me? That tells me y'all know. That tells me it makes you hella uncomfortable. Here's the only comment that was made. And by the way, this comment was not made to me. This comment was made to one of the 6 or 7 people out of the hundreds of people that liked this post that shared it. One of like 6 people that actually dared to reshare my post on their wall. One of those brave community members got this message back to them by Amber Majolson Nelson. She must be the ICE or Homeland Security Director relative or something, because they got all those extra J's and K's in their name.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And she said to the woman that posted this on her Facebook page, I just wanted to inform you that your last shared post is false. Local law enforcement plays no role in deportation. ICE is their own agency and do their own work. They have their own detainers. It's just a disappointment to see a community page like this put slander to local law enforcement.
Oh.
That was the only comment.
And it's all lies, too.
Oh, yeah. The liar is not me. Yo no soy la mentirosa. No. The liar is her. And by the way, here is a post from her page. This is a love sign that was on her Facebook page.
I don't think I have that.
Yeah, you got it. It's in the common file folder. I saw you download it.
Sorry, I don't see it on the script.
The Cold as Ice Google Drive. Check it out real quick.
All right.
It's right there. See, it says love. It's got a gun.
Okay.
Yep, you downloaded it. I saw you.
I never put it in, though.
Oh.
Yeah, we didn't put it in when we...
I thought you had.
No.
Well, I will wait for you to put it in.
Mm-hmm.
Because I really think that it's very telling. In addition to this post, this is a love sign she had on her page. She studied criminal justice. And this is what's so terrifying about this, because she studied criminal justice in our community, which means she's likely a baby wannabe cop. This is how she spells love. A gun, a police badge, 2 thumbprints in the shape of a V,
or a heart,
and these cuffs.
I see.
Now, and I have to say this because it's one thing to see, this support of law enforcement. It's another thing in the way in which some people wield it as a sign of racism. A lot of these cop-loving, boot-licking cop supporters, you can take that down now, are racists. And when they use the thin blue line as their screen cover on Facebook, or when they post the love sign like that, they mean it like how when a person in America now commits a hate crime and says, Trump, 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 Trump. That's how they mean it. That's how they're throwing out their police love. That's how they're using their love of the police and their support of the police. Because you can be somebody that respects laws, and you can be somebody that works with law enforcement like me, and also call out criminal behavior, not just among cops, but among judges, among lawyers, among any criminal of any kind. Because nobody's above the law, right? Right, 45? No one is above the law? So, let's just for a minute look at what really happened in this community. Because this woman claims incorrectly that the police here in this community do not do this, that what I said was slander, libel. I get accused of that so much.
I know.
They don't know that the affirmative defense to those claims is telling the truth. And I always got receipts, kids. But I want you to see, I have a background. We have a background in discussing this, not only in trying to pass ordinances to protect people, in trying to do the very things that people wish they had done like a decade ago when we brought this up, to try to help people in this community from eventually being in the situation we are in right now. And we didn't get a lot of support.
No.
We didn't get a lot of support, especially from the white progressives in this community. We didn't get a lot of support from y'all. You know who you are. I came to you. I said, who are the leaders of these groups? Why you guys don't have no Mexicans here? Why are you trying to censor me when I call out these racists? Why are you trying to tell me to take a more PC approach with these white people so as not to hurt their fragile feelings? Why are you white folks in your progressive organizations always trying to tell us that we have to wait for a more convenient time for our liberation? Well, let me remind you of one such person that you all knew, that you all ignored, who you still ignore. You care about all those children ripped apart from their families? Well, what about Gracie Valderas' child? What about Gracie Valderas' children? Graciela Valderas. You guys remember Graciela Valderas? Here she is. This is Gracie and her husband, Miguel Valderas. Miguel and his wife have been married for probably 20-some years now. I don't know the number at the time that she was going to be deported from this country because of the repeated arrests by the local law enforcement.
Exactly.
This woman did nothing illegal. They just knew she was undocumented, and they decided to target, yes, the local cops decided to target a family, a well-established family, one of the only Mexican families that are homeowners here in Moorhead, because this man tried to get his wife citizenship, but because of the nature of the type of work that he does, because he is a migrant worker and a seasonal worker, he was denied the right to apply for citizenship for his wife. multiple times, told that he didn't earn enough, he didn't have the right kind of employment. This is one of the many loopholes that are used to try to deny migrants from sponsoring their wives of 20-some years from even attaining naturalized citizenship, from even becoming a citizen of this country. So she was always left in limbo. She and all of her kids, all of her grandkids are U.S. citizens, but she was slated for deportation. In desperation, many of us in this community did everything that we could. Here's a picture of Gracie that's a little bit more clear and more recent. Not quite that recent, but more recent. I try to pick a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Since she was deported in 2006, it was very sad to see what ended up happening to her life, because she was so desperate to get back to her family and to her kids, her very large, extensive family here in the Fargo-Moorhead region. She tried to cross again illegally in desperation. I mean, would you do anything to get back to your family?
Oh, yeah.
Wouldn't you do anything?
Mm-hmm.
Well, she did. She tried to cross the border illegally, and since she was caught, and at that time they had made it a felony if you got caught more than once, she is now banned from ever coming back.
Yeah.
So she can never be with her family. And ever since she's left, the only way she can really communicate with her family is on Facebook, through social media. Here is a post, one of the many posts that I've seen regularly, which are heartbreaking to me. She regularly posts, "Good morning, baby. How are you? Have a great day. May God bless you. Good night, baby. How are you today? May God bless you." And it says in this one, "Buenos días, baby. Yo no pierdo la esperanza aún que llegue de esa edad, pero yo llego contigo, mi amor. Te deseo un excelente jueves. Te amo. Dios te bendiga." And so what it says is, good morning, my love. I don't lose hope of being able to reach this age together with you. Have an excellent Thursday. May God bless you, and I love you.
Wow.
And you know what? At that time, we protested because the government, this racist government, has enacted these racist policies, all of which are very recent. Again, ICE has only been around since 2003 because they've never used these kinds of inhumane policies in the past and had them as accepted by the majority of the public. But after 9/11, they did. And the brunt of that backlash was against Mexicans coming into this country. And, of course, being someone that is an advocate, that has worked as a paralegal, that has helped people get documentation and citizenship in this country, we held a rally. We held a rally on the bridge. Gracie was there. Gracie and her family were there asking for help, hoping to get visibility. There was really no coverage in the media about her.
True.
Nobody really stood up for her. None of our white leadership, many of whom knew, a lot of whom knew. I remember being in meetings, Mujeres Unidas meetings with our current mayor, Del Rey, and listening to Gracie's story, sharing what had happened to her. There wasn't a church that stepped up. There wasn't anything that in the authority, in the power, in the leadership of our community that said, we will not allow the authorities to rip this family apart. We will not, because it's the people in this community that did it. It's the people that in this community that allowed it and that turned a blind eye to those of the people in our police departments, in our institutions, in our schools, in our organizations that have gone along with this and that have allowed it to happen. You are the ones that have the blood on your hands. You, as well as those who sat silently by and felt like, well, you don't want to call the police chief a bad guy because he lives down the street from you, or you don't want to call the teachers at the school who allowed ICE to come in as, being complicit with destroying families and calling them as racist monsters, calling them barbecue Beckys, showing their indifference and how they can get people hurt and even killed. How they're participating daily in these atrocities themselves because it makes you feel uncomfortable to confront people.
Yes.
Because it makes you feel uncomfortable to confront people. Meanwhile, our people have been getting deported. Mm-hmm. They've had their rights taken away and their rights violated.
Yes.
And I just want to stop for a moment because as a paralegal, I find it hilarious. Every time I talk about this, I hear all of the racist and super stupid and ignorant white folks out there who don't know poo from Shinola when it comes
mm-hmm.
to the law, especially not immigration law,
yeah. mm-hmm.
going, they broke the law. No, they violated an administrative code on the level of not paying your taxes on time, like exactly on the level of not paying taxes on time. It's not part of the penal code. Therefore, under no circumstances should there be any kind of criminal-like punishment enacted on anyone because they're not even being charged with any kind of crime. That's why they are not afforded attorneys. Dimwit.
Yeah.
Did you not notice that they don't get attorneys? Not even the children get attorneys? How do you explain that, bozo? Oh, well, it's because it doesn't fall under the criminal justice system. Well, then how do you justify that people are kept in cages, in prisons, tortured, raped, deported? How do you justify all that? Oh, 'cause they broke the law. You're justifying inhumane, cruel, and here's the thing. You're telling everyone, you're signaling to everyone, dead man walking over here, brainless zombie over here,
mm-hmm.
heartless monster right here, folks, Nazi right over here, I'm the Nazi, here I am, look upon evil. That's what they're telling you. That's what they're telling you, and you know what? Disturbingly, the majority of you out there are not reacting in horror. You're not reacting in abject horror. Because any more than you can hold your leaders accountable, then you can hold your police chiefs and your police officers accountable. You can't even hold your police officers accountable for murdering unarmed people of color that are citizens in your country every day. You cannot even account for that. How in the hell are you going to account for those who are undocumented, those that can be made invisible, those who you put in your concentration camps so nobody can see what you do to them, those who are never even named, never even counted, those who are tried in large groups in kangaroo courts? You can't. Let me tell you, you cannot. You have failed all of these people, and you are failing them. And yes, all of you have blood on your hands because you failed to listen to a Mexican crossing lines before, because you failed to listen to the Mexicans, the people most affected by this, telling you what we need and how we need it if you really cared, if you really wanted to help. And you know, funny that this happened. Not funny, ha ha, but interesting, like, I see how racist this community is. Because, you know, as outraged as Mexicans were, we had a pretty big turnout to that rally.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the central messages of what I said at that rally was this: I am a Mexican through and through. There is no difference between me and someone that is undocumented, because we are all human and we all have the right to be on this continent that my ancestors originated from over 30,000 years ago. There is no place on this continent that you can dig under the soil and not find the blood, the bones of my ancestors buried all over it. So no, I am not going to distinguish myself from the Mexican or any other Central or any other South American or any other indigenous brother or sister on this continent. I'm not going to distinguish myself from what I am, from my identity. And I'm also a person that has, because of that identity, always known that we have a duty among indigenous people of hospitality. It isn't so much this, not for Mexican culture. I'm speaking of my Mexicanness now, my Mexican indigeneity. And that is, we know, we believe, and we know that the hospitality culture that we are supposed to impart to others is a way of ensuring that we are paying forward that help that some random stranger out there will probably need to give to someone in my family. Because we all have someone in our family that's crossed that border. We all have someone in our family that's been kidnapped crossing that border, raped crossing that border. We all have someone that's died crossing that border. We all have someone that's been in the detention centers. We all have had someone that's been robbed by Border Patrol agents, raped by Border Patrol agents. We've all had someone murdered by Border Patrol agents. We've all had someone killed, some child raped by Customs Enforcement agents, by Border Patrol agents, every single one of us. And there, but for the grace of God, go we. We know that. So when we see an undocumented person crossing the desert, when we see a person asking for help, when we see somebody asking for water or food or shelter, we know, because we are the ransomed slaves. We know. We have to take care of them. We have to give them refuge. We have to recognize our ancestors and their humanity, because we're the only ones that can recognize them as human. No one else here will. And you know what? It pains me to say this, but this community chose a British banjo player to support over this woman, Gracie Valderas, who, if you ask anyone in this community who knew her, was always volunteering at the church. She couldn't hold a job. She had to be supported entirely by her husband through this whole process, as she's applying to try to get citizenship to be here. On a train to nowhere, on a road to nowhere, in a system that legally makes it impossible for people to get in line, to follow their rules, or to actually get naturalized in this country. They picked this guy. He was supported locally by people. People were outraged that Johnny Button, an English banjo player who lived near Holly, Minnesota, moved here in 2008 and was trying to be the world's fastest banjo player. He was just a very, very recent transplant after all this Gracie Valderas stuff happened. In fact, almost simultaneously after we learned that Gracie Valderas had been once again arrested for trying to enter the country and would never, ever be reunited with her family again.
And they did all sorts of stories. I mean, I saw news story after news story. He was being interviewed on television. There was print media. He had a saga because he was British and he was about to be deported because he overstayed his visa. And he tried to claim he was a special talent for this country, that he could play the banjo really fast. And people just ate this up. It was report after report after report. And Gracie never got any news coverage.
Nope.
She had been here for decades.
I wrote up a story. I tried to get it published. I couldn't get anybody to publish it. And I know that other people tried as well. Nobody in the media really wanted to cover it. Our unity rally that we held there was covered. But here's what I also said to people. I said, I'm always going to keep doing this. I don't care how many laws they pass saying that if you help an undocumented person, if you pick someone up on the road that's hitchhiking, if you offer shelter or food or water to an undocumented person, you too will be committing a crime. Well, I'm like, well, take me to jail right now. Because I am going to feed the hungry when they're hungry. I am going to give water to those who are thirsty. I'm going to give shelter to those who are in need. And if that means you're going to lock me up, you're going to have to lock me up, because I've been doing it my entire life. My ancestors, my family, and everyone I know has been doing this our entire lives. We ain't going to stop today. I ain't going to stop being a human or seeing humans where they are, where they stand. feeling their pain, hearing their cries, as I know God in heaven does, because we are all created in his image. And I will not stop. I am an American citizen, but I know that I am not treated and will never be treated and will never be seen as one by these racists in America that would do this to my brothers and sisters. And so I want to share with you why we need to hold all of these virtue signaling liars and hypocrites in our communities accountable. You see them, they're talking about how much they care about the Mexican babies, or they're talking about these children, but are you holding them accountable? Are you asking them to actually stand up to these atrocities? Because I already have, and I'm holding accountable with name and face all of the things that y'all forgot here in Fargo Moorhead. I'm going to bring them up in a minute. But here first, I want you to listen to Tim Weiss and hear what he had to say. He said it very eloquently. I know white people love receiving messages better from their own people. So
Exactly.
I'll let Tim tell you, because it might sound better to your white people ears.
Exactly.
Well, here's the thing. White America has been raised to believe, A, the police are always the good guys, and frankly, that black lives matter less than white comfort. And until we deal with that, until we deal with the reality, because here's the problem. When one person calls the police on a person of color over a barbecue in a park, sleeping in a common room at Yale, sitting at the Starbucks or whatever it is, knowing that Tamir Rice's life was snuffed because someone called the cops on a 12-year-old boy playing with a toy gun. Something that white boys do all across this country without fear of being shot. And that's a national story. You can't tell me you didn't know that happened. When John Crawford is called, the cops called on him at the Walmart, also in the state of Ohio, not to pick on Ohio, and he's standing there with an air rifle that he pulled off the shelf at Walmart. He's talking to his girlfriend or whatever, and the cops are called on him. They come, they shoot him. When you know that is what happens, what you are saying is, my discomfort with you right now is worth more than the potential that your life could be snuffed in 10 minutes. Until that stops, nothing is going to change.
Until that stops, nothing is going to change. If you are horrified about what is happening to these children, then you would have been horrified 10 years ago,
Exactly.
20 years ago, 30 years ago. This has been going on for a very, very long time. This is nothing.
You would have been continually horrified instead of all of a sudden being horrified.
Not only are they not just suddenly horrified, in the past, when you have been directly confronted about these things happening in your own backyard, when you have expressed your virtue signaling horror that these things even existed in society, you're horrified about them. When you were told, oh, they're happening right here. This neighbor of yours, your father, your teacher, this guy, this cop, they're the ones doing it. All of you went, shh, don't talk about him like that. Shh. Let's just all be friendly. Shh. We're a good community. We don't have problems. We don't have racism here. You would rather let people of color die than make a white person feel shame for 5 minutes being called out on their racism. You would rather let children sleep in cages, freeze to death, be separated from their children, and killed or lost from their parents forever, which is what they've been doing. They've been taking the parental rights away from these kids. They've been doing it for decades. There are millions of children who have had their parents taken away from them permanently by the United States. And then those children are put in the system or given to white people. And you know what? That is going to happen en masse now. And if you claim to care about any of that, then you would stand up to your neighbors, your cops, your teachers, your people in your own family who stand for this, who support it, who turn a blind eye to it. Those who are currently carrying out these practices, you would hold them accountable and you would do it right now. You can still do it right now. if you weren't as cold as ice. But see, the thing is, you are as cold as ice. You all want to point the finger at ICE and go, ICE, ICE, they're awful. ICE is this horrible agency. ICE works independently. ICE doesn't work with the cops. ICE is the monster. ICE needs to be defunded. ICE, 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 ICE. ICE doesn't work in a vacuum, folks. ICE doesn't happen in a vacuum. Okay? Arrests, deportations, detentions, referrals, racial profiling, separation of families. That doesn't happen in a vacuum. Every member of your community, every member of this community participates in one way or another. Every single one of you has blood on your hands. The churches, all of you who have remained silent as you have watched, as you have seen people coming to you and asking you for help, asking for sanctuary, asking for the fathers, the priests, the ministers, and the leaders of those congregations to step forward and offer refuge, protection, and Christian refuge, sanctuary for the wanderer in your land, for the refugee and the immigrant in your land. The people that most know the law of God, you would think that they would be the first who wants to institute that law of God. But neither priest leaders, neither priests nor community leaders in any religious capacity in this community has stepped forward and demanded that the other churches participate and that they hold the authorities in their town accountable for the atrocities that are being committed against communities of color. Instead, they have stayed silent. You are complicit. You can't now all of a sudden be like freaked out and going, oh, these people are terrible.
Yeah.
You help them.
And it's been going a long time. Just do a quick search. You want to go over some of the headlines from the past couple of years?
Oh, yeah. We're going to do that. Look at this. To this woman that said, the cops don't help. The cops don't do this. Let's go through some things that happened. There were 8 West Fargo Mexican restaurant workers that were held for immigration status. Oh, why? This is exactly what I'm talking about. The cops illegally holding someone they believe to be undocumented so that ICE can check out whether they're not a U.S. citizen. And it says, go ahead, read that, honey.
Yeah, the 8 West Fargo Mexican restaurant workers held for immigration status.
They're being held for investigation
into their immigration status after officers responded to a noise complaint at a home early today.
Yeah.
Police were called at 4:20 a.m. to the duplex at 413 7th Avenue East for a report of loud voices, stomping, and the sound of people falling, said Mike Wrighton, Assistant West Fargo Police Chief. Now, he was a guy that was in a meeting with us 10 years ago.
Now, I want you to tell the story of what he told us actually happened on that call because, Mexican music can sound many decibels louder, and about the noise ordinances. So if you will put yourself on screen for a moment and discuss what that police chief said and how they decided to resolve that call on a noise complaint.
Well, it's just it's a ruse, this whole thing with the noise. Usually, a true noise ordinance should have decibel levels that they would actually measure the decibel. That would be, against the law at a certain. They usually do time things like 10 o'clock at night till 6 or 7 in the morning. That is noise ordinance, but in this community, their noise ordinances, except and maybe in Fargo, is that basically if someone complains. So you could take country music and play it at the same level, same decibel, and play Tejano music and play at the same decibel. The white people are going to think that the Mexican music is louder. And also, people speaking Spanish loudly compared to the people speaking English loudly. That was a ruse for the police to go in to have their probable cause covered, which they probably still wouldn't have if the people would have had lawyers, and go in and arrest people for not even what they went there for. It was a noise complaint. Usually you knock on the door, you got to turn it down. 4 in the morning, you had a complaint from a neighbor, and they leave it alone. No, they decided to check the immigration status of these men and haul them all away. They weren't even at work. Haul them all away. The place they worked the next day couldn't even open because all their workers had been detained. This was the police department. This wasn't ICE coming in just doing their job, supposedly. The police alert ICE continually.
And they had the excuse that they needed to call ICE because they wanted the ICE to help them translate.
Yeah.
What a load of hooey. As a translator for both district and federal court, who has to register, and all of the translators have to register on a roster that the Highway Patrol, the police, and the courts all share when they need a translator, okay? And I know because as a court officer of the court, both here and in the state that I used to live in, I knew who was on that roster because I frequently had to use it because as a paralegal, I couldn't always translate for the court stuff that was going on. So they have people that they could go to without having to call immigration. That is not standard operating procedure. The cops chose to do that because even though they do not have a 287G contract, the local cops took it upon themselves in an unfunded mandate nobody asked them to do to be racist against the communities of color here, to engage in the racist practices of the people of this community. To follow the orders. I mean, you can't just blame the cops because the cops aren't the only problem. It's the barbecue Beckies in the community. You know what I'm talking about. The reason why that restaurant shut down, the reason why the economic prosperity of those Mexicans and that community in West Fargo and that restaurant and all of those 8 people that were detained and deported and that the local cops participated and helped get deported. That wasn't just because of the cops, no, or ICE, no. It was because of the local racist person that made the phone call.
Yep, exactly.
Okay? There's plenty of those local barbecue Beckies making the phone call. You know who you are. I know because I've had white people come into my backyard unannounced. Without my invitation on my private property to come and tell me to turn down my music during the day. I live in a neighborhood where not even a mile from my house, they have football games and they literally fire fireworks and have really loud music and announcers all the time. But my Mexican music on a Sunday afternoon is enough to allow a white person to simply walk onto my lawn and say, you need to turn that down. And I do, because I don't want them to call the cops on me. You've seen what the cops are willing to do when they come onto the private property of a Mexican in this community, even when there is no call for it, even when they work in the media. And how they treat us when we report it to you. Do you think anybody in authority in this community ever had anything to say publicly about what I reported that was done to me and to my husband during the Kathleen Bennett story when the cops showed up here? Yeah. Because we decided to light a fire in our fireplace
in August.
And they showed up to break down our door. Look, folks, unless and until, just like Tim said, we are willing to accept the fact that every single one of us is complicit in putting these people in jail. Unless we are willing to hold our racist neighbors, our racist barbecue Beckies in our communities accountable for calling the cops. Shame them. Shun them. Shut them down. Say it with me. Shame them. Shun them. Shut it down. If you see somebody calling the cops, shame them, shun them, shut it down. Do not let them be the person that calls the brown shirts to that community center to have all of those parents' children arrested in Ohio. Do not be the person that allows that racist Muslim woman in the Walmart parking lot threatening to kill all Muslims to get away without going to jail for that. She doesn't just get to take a photo and get a pat on the back because she shook the hands of the Muslim ladies she threatened to murder.
Exactly.
What about all the rest of the Muslims in the community? They didn't get an apology. Why does that woman, that white woman, get to walk? Why do all of the white racists, the white supremacists get to walk? Why aren't we holding them accountable? Why is it that our own mayor in Fargo can't even say the word Nazis when addressing the fact that there was a bunch of Nazi posters in our downtown? Why are we so fragile and scared to address these issues? We would rather let ICE, let our cops, let our teachers, let the racists in the town take these children, destroy these families, get people killed, get people raped, get people kidnapped and disappeared? You prefer the latter? I can't afford to. I'm sorry. I can't afford to. I'm going to keep making sure that this woman that sent this message saying, I libeled and slandered, I'm just going to pull receipts from him. You can Google this stuff. I know she had a computer because she posted this nonsensical BS on Facebook. I just wanted to inform you that you last shared post, and that was the post that I made.
Yeah.
Dear Fargo Moorhead, is false. Local law enforcement plays no role in deportation. ICE is their own agency and do their own work. They have their own detainers. It's just a disappointment to see a community page like this put slander to local law enforcement. I ain't putting no slander.
Yeah.
I'm putting the truth. You're putting out lies. And that Nazi woman, whoever she is, and yeah, I'm going to call her a Nazi. I don't know what kind of white supremacist she is. I was just watching this comedian. It killed me. It gave me the feels. I was like, oh yes, I identify with this so much. Because he said that he called some racist Trump supporter a Nazi. Somebody that espoused racism and racist thinking and racist ideology against others, a Nazi. And I'm going to call this woman a Nazi because she has no human compassion. Rather than address the fact that a Mexican, okay, a person that actually suffers the consequences of people like her's ignorance and racism, is saying, this is what happens in our community with our law enforcement. Not from a place of ignorance. As a reporter, as a journalist, as a paralegal, as somebody with a history. And also that I can demonstrably show you with receipts that it actually happened, okay?
Oh, yeah. Look right here. This is Bismarck. 18 illegal aliens woke Friday morning to a rapping on their motel doors. Bismarck police assisted in the arrest of illegal immigrants, which took place at 6 a.m. at Motel 6. Then over here, then we have 90 arrested in the Midwest.
Yep.
And then we have the Cast 23, where it was 23 people arrested. And
they were trafficked. They were victims of trafficking. As I was the editor of the High Plains Reader at the time, I made this a headline front page story. And here, our lieutenant governor, the current racist lieutenant governor that was involved in treating Native Americans at Standing Rock like crap, like afterthoughts, is the same lieutenant governor that charged these people, the Cast 23, with identity theft.
Wow.
They were victims of human trafficking. The only reason they were using false identities was because they needed to flee their captors, their slave owners. They were trafficked people. Mm-hmm. More than 500 people from India were the victims of human trafficking by a giant construction company that was using them as slave labor to reconstruct all of the piping in Louisiana after Hurricane Katrina. Mm-hmm. Oh, the lessons you learn about disaster porn. Mm-hmm. Oh, the lessons you learn. Puerto Rico. How do you think I can predict these things? Because I've been paying attention for a very long time. I've been calling this out for a very long time. And all of y'all want to sit there and go, oh, we have amnesia. Or at least we're going to pretend. Like here in Fargo Moorhead, we have amnesia. Mm-hmm. And you're going to sit there, people that are in the Human Relations Commissions, people that are in these police organizations, people that are in the educational institutions, people that are working in the media, people that are working in social services, people that are anywhere in this community. You want to pretend, you want to hide under a rock, you want to virtue signal like, oh my God, Who's doing this stuff? You're doing it. You're doing this stuff, Fargo Moorhead. You're doing it. You, your neighbors, right here in your backyard, you're doing it. You don't want to look at the stuff you're doing. You want to ride away into the sunset and go save some Mexican children over there. You want to bring some home, catch them all like they're Pokeballs, so that you can show everyone. You want to be like those white ladies in Minnesota that murdered those black children. You want to take in the black children and save them?
Yeah.
No, thank you. Give indigenous children back to their parents. Stop collecting human beings. It's not cool. It's called genocide. You can't do this and not expect punishment from God. You cannot do this and not expect that you will be called the monsters that you are behaving like. That you will not be allowed to simply pretend like, oh, you are some compassionate, warm-hearted, well-meaning white person because you posted a story about the children in the cages on your Facebook page. Because you said that, yes, Trump is a monster for this, because you said that we need to abolish ICE, or maybe because you went even so far as to say we should have open borders. All humans have the right to have the dignity to choose where they live and where they migrate to make better lives for themselves. Maybe you've even been one of those people, but I bet you still haven't confronted your racist uncle. I bet you still haven't had the decency to stand up to your local law enforcement and tell them to stop rounding people up. Tell them to not let ICE into your communities. Right here in Fargo, we have a bus station. The cops have been lurking around one of the only forms of public transportation available in and out of this city that is reliable and regular. And it's been filthy with these ICE and Border Patrol and law enforcement doing the work of the ICE and Border Patrol, working in tandem with the ICE and the Border Patrol. And they've been called out. Remember what they did to that, was he a Sudanese man?
Yeah.
He was a U.S. resident.
Yep. He had all the papers. He was legally in this country. And he was at the bus station. They shook him down, demanded his papers. He didn't have them. And he
refused to produce them.
Yeah.
He said that he knows his rights.
That's
Probably somebody told him, if you're not within 100 miles of the U.S. border, they can't force you to show your papers. You're not required to show your papers. So you can refuse, especially if you're not driving or if you're not doing something. They can't just come up to you and go, are you a citizen? It's actually unconstitutional to demand that you, as a U.S. citizen or as a person living in this country, show what country or residence or citizenship you have. But most people don't know their rights. So this guy did, and he said, I don't have to show you anything.
Yeah, and he walked away from him and started leaving, and then some Good Samaritan, they called him, went out and tackled him. I mean, he went and tackled him, and they detained him. He had his brother go back to his home to get the papers. He was detained, put in jail for weeks.
And then they claimed that because he tried to escape from the cops, he had assaulted a federal law enforcement officer, and that would disqualify him from continuing to be a U.S. resident. Those were grounds for him to have his his permanent U.S. residency overturned, and he could now be put into deportation proceedings, and his wife and children, all of whom have been processing to try to become naturalized through him, would now lose their father and their husband.
Yep.
That was done by local law enforcement. If he had not been asked about his papers, please, he had legal status and was not committing any sort of crime. These people precipitated the situation. And because this man knew his rights and refused to comply to this illegal request of his papers, he was legally thrown in jail. He was, they always trump up these charges.
Yeah.
A cop got looked at the wrong way. I was assaulted and feared for my life.
Yeah, obstruction.
And that was enough to say that now he
obstructed justice.
He obstructed justice. So here is another one of those articles.
Oh, we've had.
Oh, you went through all of them?
Yep. One thing I wanted to show though is the sanctuary cities.
Cool.
There's not many. As we said that we based our separation of power ordinance on the Minneapolis ordinance. But you look around the country, there needs to be a lot more. And this is where local voters, people who live in the community, you have to be a voter, can hold your city officials accountable to create an ordinance that would protect people, in your community from the abuse from ICE, from the use of these federal agencies to do their work in areas that they're not supposed to be doing them.
I think that we, as a God-fearing and as a supposedly Christian nation, should follow the laws set forth. And these come from the Torah, which many of the Christians know as the Old Testament, in which it says that you should have one law, the same law for the citizen and for the non-citizen. They should have the same laws enforced upon them. I agree with that. And because all of these arrogant, racist Nazis that keep saying, follow the law, I agree, follow the law. And since we are taking people of color, exclusively people of color, and charging them under administrative violations as if they were criminals committing some kind of terrorism under Homeland Security, and taking their children away from them and putting them in detention centers and leaving them there for indefinite amounts of times, I think that all the people in this country who are white, who have at any time failed to file their taxes on time, because that's an administrative violation at the same level of a violation of coming into this country undocumented, okay? Same level of violation. So if you failed to pay your taxes on time, paid the wrong amount of taxes, didn't file your taxes, then I think that, and retroactively so, this applies, we should go round up all of those people, throw them in detention centers, and steal their children right now. All of them.
Yeah.
That would be an equal application of a punishment for an administrative violation. And none of those people can be afforded a lawyer. None of those people need to be treated in a municipal court or in a criminal court. It'll be in an administrative kangaroo court where hundreds of people can be given judgment all at the same time. And all of it has to be in Spanish. And none of the white people get an interpreter.
There you go.
That would be an equal application of the law.
Mm-hmm.
But y'all don't want that, do ya? Y'all don't want your children taken away from you for some petty violation that's not even a crime, that's not even considered a crime in this country. So for all of those hypocrites and liars that bring up the law, that usually don't know the law, who are probably a bunch of criminals themselves because they would know, for those people, just call them what they are. They're Nazis. I don't have to try to differentiate. As I said, this comedian said, he said, I heard some racist thing, and I said, I called that person a Nazi, and somebody came over after my show like, Hadi, you really shouldn't call that person Nazi because they're different from this, Proud Boys, and, they're like there's the alt-right, and there's these guys, and there's the skinheads, and he goes, excuse me, those people think that we all look alike. Do you really think I give a flip what they call themselves? Nah. If they're racist and they espouse white supremacy, y'all are Nazis. That's all I'm gonna, I'm not gonna split hairs. I'm not gonna parse the edges of how inhumane or Nazi-like you are.
Exactly.
It's enough that you think that these children aren't humans for me to know there's something very, very wrong with you. You can look at these humans and not see humans. You're not, you might be a Nazi. You might be a fascist Nazi. You might be cold as ice. So, folks, consider all of these things that I have shared with you. Hold your local leaders accountable. Hold the people in your law enforcement community accountable. The schools, the teachers, ask the superintendents, ask the school boards, what are you doing to protect the children? Vote with your feet. Why did we have all of these students get up out of the schools and march out in unison because they were being murdered by these guns? But we won't do anything to stop children, actual children, from being kidnapped from their parents? Really? Being trafficked by the U.S. government, trafficked. So, we are hypocrites. We are liars when we say that we value human life, that we value the law, when we are violating the laws of God, the laws of morality, the laws of human decency. And that goes also for cops that are still racially profiling people. Stop taking all of those 911 calls from the Barbecue Beckys. You don't need to hear from Barbecue Becky. If Barbecue Becky calls 911, hang up on her. What happened to Barbecue Becky? Nobody's heard from her, and nobody wants to be her. But the truth is, the majority of you turn into her like this. The minute a person of color calls you a racist, the minute a person of color tells you, makes you feel uncomfortable, and then that sting, that guilt makes you think, yeah, call 911. Let me call ICE. And in that moment, as Tim Weiss said, your comfort is more important than my life or the life of these children or the lives of these children. Hold your neighbors, your friends, your relatives accountable to their racism. Do it now. Do it today. Don't wait to be told. Don't wait to be asked. Far from needing to give these children refuge, there's 1,000,001 things you can do to stop and resist the racists and confront the racists in the places of authority that are ripping apart our families right in your own backyard. And you can start right now. Start today, please. Please, for the love of God. Please, for the love of these children. Please, for the love of your own humanity. Do this for these children. Do this for your community. Do it for the truth. Unless you are as cold as ice. And thank you for listening to this Mexican Crossing Lines on 88.1 FM, KPPPLP, Fargo Moorhead, where we are adding local color to your airwaves.